Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm back in here again. Not much longer after I completed the past one. Let me clear my throat for a second. So, yeah, X Files, good old X Files from the 1990s. A lot of people will remember them. Not only people in my generation, but I've noticed lately that a lot of people in the subsequent generations after the Gen Xers, well, my folks were boomers. I'm Gen X. My folks got into X Files a bit. It was sort of in their. It's sort of weird, I guess, if you look at generations now. Like my parents were probably the same age that I was when X Files was coming out. So they were probably more into it than I even realized. But, that I was in it again as a teenager, high school, early to mid 90s. And when I was involved in all the UFO stuff back in the 90s, it's a huge topic. Um, but yeah, UFOs are something that, like, in X Files, that's something that crosses generations. It's like intergenerational. And, when I was a kid, like oldies music, for example, like oldies music was like 1940s, 50s, 60s. That was like old music, it didn't have anything to do really with sort of where I was in music in the 80s and 90s with like Metallica and Megadeth and Queensryche and I don't know, all the different groups that I listened to. But it sort of seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong from your perspective, but from like the 90s, like the 80s, 90s, well, late 90s, or let's see, late 80s, all the 90s, all the early 2000s, and even some of the 2010s. So that's like a 40-year gap. So from, yeah, like 80s, late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. People still listen to all of that music now as if it is new music, as if it's fresh. Like when I go out to the pub, when I go out to the tap, there's people that I know from all generations, really, all that are legal to drink, of course, at the local pub. Um, but we all share the same music. And I don't remember it being that way when I was a kid. Like I said, when music from the 40s, 50s, 60s, even like the parts of the 70s, it didn't jive with my generation. There was like a gap. There was like a delineation between the oldies and now. But since I was born in the 70s, and then you have the music from the 80s, 90s, the early, zero zeros and the 20 teens, early 20 teens, all that music's still just as valid, now in 2022 as it was when it first came out, which is, so there's sort of something strange sort of happening in the musical culture of the world. I think that, all that, everything from those time frames I'm talking about can be clumped into one sort of, one container of music. Um, Maybe it has a changed or advanced. Now there were, I guess, back in the 70s, there was like the Beatles and the Bee Gees and just like the old groups, from those days. And even the Beatles and Pink Floyd. Is another one of those that really crossed over many different generational lines and everything. Some of the early stuff was a little bit different, but like you have the album The Wall, Pink Floyd, The Wall, Dark Side of the Moon. Let me pull up some stuff here. I don't want to get copyright strikes, so I'm probably not going to play any actual music here because they'll copyright strike me. I've gotten a number of those lately. Let's see, Brave browser. Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, so my Brave browser here. Let's see. So you got like Pink Floyd, like all the different. I mean, they. This is the early stuff, like the early pictures and stuff of them and everything. But they crossed over like with The Wall and The Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, my parents were listening to that stuff. And then when I was in Animals, that's 1977, Pink Floyd album, and then the Wall album, and then there's like Momentary Lapse of Reason album. I mean, they really crossed over. And I haven't really heard too many people talk about the crossover of music from the old days. Because, probably in the 19 teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there was one sort of type of music. It was like jazz. It was like early, like, I don't know, sort of pop type rock, and everything. And then in the 60s, the Beatles sort of came, and a lot of their stuff's been covered and sort of reprised by different groups over the years, like Simon and Garfunkel, for example. Simon and Garfunkel was covered by like Queensryche, by Disturbed, by different more modern people, and they turned it into something that the newer generations were cool with and stuff. And the smart people in those new generations, they knew it was older music and everything. They didn't take it that, like, for example, Disturbed, I think it's The Sounds of Silence. Let's pull that up. Disturbed Sounds of Silence. Yeah, let's go to videos. Yeah, like that one there. I'm not, like I said, I'm gonna cut the audio a little bit here on it, but I don't think it's even coming through. But yeah, but the one where he did his thing, Cobblestone. Yeah, that's where I gotta sort of cut out the audio, but it's the same song. It's the same song, and if you go back to like the Simon and Garfunkel's days, it probably meant something to them different back then than it does to us now, but than it will to my kids. It means something, but it's the music today, even the stuff being brought back from the older generations. There's a transitional, place it's going through. It's just amazing to me. Now, like, for example, I guess it happens across many different genres. I mean, like my daughter, for example, my youngest daughter is in marching band. She plays the flute, and she's really good. And she really likes like classical music, like Chopin, and probably like Mozart and different things like that. And that's crossed like hundreds of years of generational passage. It's come and gone, but I mean, even my youngest daughter, 13, 14, I guess, 14, going on, well, she'll be 15 this coming year, but she likes the classical music from the old days, the same stuff that my dad got me into, and the same stuff that his family and everything got him into back in the days, So I guess there's certain types of music that cross over generational lines, some that don't. I mean, it's one of those fluid things. It's not predictable. You never know which one. Like, well, for me, The Doors was a big one. The band The Doors, Jim Morrison, L.A. Woman, and Riders of the Storm, and there's so many. The End, Spanish Caravan, different songs from the Doors that made it through the generational lines, and it probably with the Doors it sort of helped that like I think it was 91 or 92 when Val Kilmer and Meg Ryan did the Doors movie that came out that year. And now I was fans of them before, People Are Strange, that song. People are strange when you're a stranger. That you had that song from the old days. And I knew that song before the movie came out in the early 90s. Same with Riders of the Storm and a couple others. But music's an amazing thing. It finds ways to pass through and continue down the line, whether it's the original music or covers of it. And I guess, of course, all classical music, it's all covers because, they're all dead. Mozart, Beethoven, all those guys aren't even around anymore. So, different symphonies and so on cover that stuff. So, yeah. Don't really know why I came back. I sort of came in to get into UFOs, but I sort of got completely off UFOs and like musical stuff. But yeah, the whole UFO thing's pretty active right now. You have a lot of sightings and stuff going on around the world. There's been a lot of sightings in the Ukraine and Russia and the war zones of lights in the sky that are unexplainable, especially in the Ukraine. And there's a good YouTube channel, if you have the time to go look it up, called Secure Team. Secure Team 10, I think is the name of it. Really good guy. He's had a lot of issues over the past few years, but he's come back in force now. He's sort of active and really back to what his entire goal was. Let me see if I can find his channel name. I don't know where my phone went. Totally lost my phone here. Am I sitting on it? Nope. I don't know. So yeah, I was talking about that Secure Team 10 on YouTube. I think it's Secure Team 10. I guess I could have looked it up on my computer here, but Secure Team, 10. That's what it is. Really good guy. He's about 2 million subscribers, and he just covers a lot of the current stuff, past stuff, different topics when it comes to UFO and alien, X-Files, weird type stuff like that, which is super fascinating. I mean, a friend of mine that I talked to the other night, I'll leave nameless, but he sort of said, what does it matter that this stuff is out there? What effect does it have on your everyday life? And he was, at the time it sort of pissed me off a little bit because, over the pandemic, for example, during the pandemic, the Pentagon came out and literally announced that we have alien ships that are not of this world. And nobody sort of batted an eye at it. It wasn't a big deal, but they literally admitted that there's extraterrestrial life. They're out there and everything, but nobody cared. Biggest story probably in the history of mankind that there's other life, and they have ships. They have technology and ships that are not of this world. Again, crickets. I guess all the crickets have gone in for the winter, but it was maddening how quiet the masses were. And I mean, it was covered on some of the mainstream channels. Fox News covered it, Joe Rogan covered it, Tim Pool covered it. There was the Lazar documentary, Lazar, and I think it was Jeremy Corbell, and then there was the Ad Astra Academy with the Blink 182 guy, Tom DeLonge, and many different other things that have been coming out over the past couple of years. But it's just so maddening that people aren't listening, or it's not there's people are listening, but it's crazy that is not being talked about more, especially in the scientific circles, the popular scientific circles like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Most of the scientist types are very quiet on the topic. Maybe because they're government funded, they don't want to, piss off the overlords that fund them or whatever. So they're just going to go with the typical old line, like, there's a good chance that there's extraterrestrial life out there, and you got the Fermi paradox, a calculation that says like if only 1% of 1% of 1%, whatever the planets, the galaxies, the solar system, have life or whatever of any kind, then there's like a certain percentage that there's intelligent life, and so they go with all those old scientific things, but they really need a lot of the people who are coming out with pretty solid government information. They need to be talking to the astrophysics, the typical science people, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and the science guy dude, and I don't know, there's a Brian Greene or something from like England, some astrophysicists from over there, and a lot of other astrophysicists. They need to be. The groups need to get together. They need to start talking and say, hey, we might have something here. Like the government might actually have something here. And if we all get together, maybe they'll tell us, maybe they'll let us know that, yeah, it's real, and just put it all to bed, put the whole conspiracy that's been going around since 1940, put it to bed already. So tired of whenever I bring up this topic, I have, with somebody who's not familiar, I have to go all the way back to, the 1947 or, the Admiral Byrd stuff or the Antarctica, where they sent like a whole flotilla, a whole group of ships down to Antarctica, and they like returned like beat up, and, a lot of soldiers died on the Admiral Byrd trip. Look that up. That's a whole other topic in itself. The Admiral Byrd mission to Antarctica. Go look it up. Very good. I don't know why I whisper. I'm sort of Joe Bidening you right now. There's no little girls around, so no worries. That's terrible to even say. He did like sniff another little girl, I think, the other day. Man, what's going on with politics? I mean, holy crap. Anybody who's out there, I mean, I didn't even want to get into politics. I've talked obviously a lot about music, and then a little bit about the X-Files stuff, but even the current politics don't vote for the same people. These last few years have been hell for everybody. I know it has. And I know the 4 years before under he who shall not be named, they'll probably like ban me or something. I don't know, strike me. But everything was pretty good under his administration. It was all not too bad. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking, even if it's not him, somebody who's like on the same wavelength, when it comes to like the economics and monetary stuff and oil and energy and so on. Somebody who has a lot of common sense. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to jump out of here for tonight. And I don't have my old intro. I'm just going to go out with the X-Files intro here. So everybody have a good night and peace out.